The Latin Times had a conversation with Luis Chaparro, one of the most relevant reporters covering the U.S.-Mexico border, cartels, and Latin America. We spoke with him about his upbringing, how the murder of his friends made him throw his life into journalism, and how a journalist covers the border in these hectic times. First off, I want to ask you, what's your full name?
It's Luis Alberto Chaparro.
Luis Alberto Chaparro. Alberto's your middle name?
Yeah, that's my middle.
And you only have one last name?
Chaparro Villanueva.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like long names.
Where were you born? You were born in the U.S., right?
I was born in Ciudad Juarez. Ciudad Juarez, Mexico. And but I have the dual citizenship. I'm both a U.S. and Mexican citizenship.
Okay, but you grew up in Ciudad Juarez most of the time?
I grew up in Ciudad Juarez. Yeah, that's literally where my family and I grew up. And then I moved briefly to Mexico City, and then I came back to Juarez, and then I moved to El Paso. So
and do you stay in El Paso most of the time now?
It's really, I literally split my time a lot between Juarez, El Paso, and Mexico City, and traveling through Latin America. I guess it would be fair to say that I spend a third of my time in El Paso and a third of my time in Juarez and a third of my time either in Mexico City or at a different Mexico City.
Are you doing assignments outside of Mexico?
Yes. I mean, I've done not too often, but I do cover. Well, with Vice, the thing is I'm a correspondent for Latin America, so I literally cover the whole region from Brazil to the border. The thing is, it's sometimes cheaper to hire a freelancer in Brazil than traveling all the way there. But I do have covered for Vice, for CBS, for several other outlets, Colombia, Haiti, Guatemala, mostly those countries.
And you said you go to Juarez and you also go to Mexico City. What do you do in Mexico City?
What
do you do in Mexico City?
Usually it's meeting with editors or with sources like government sources it's basically mostly official stuff, you know. I don't have like a lot of unofficial sources in Mexico City, but if it's someone with the Mexican government or even agents with the U.S. government as well that are posted in Mexico City, I do that often.
Okay. And I'm just curious, are those usually on-record interviews that you do with these government officials?
No, for the most part, they're off the record. When I need something on the record, I'll reach out to the, through the press, through the press contact and stuff. They usually don't get back to you, or they get back to you with like the usual statement. Either it is no comments or something really boring and plain like, we're working on that or whatever. You know, so, but no, I do a lot of off the record and anonymous, quote unquote, sourcing.
And when that happens, is it because these are people who they want to voice what's happening, but they can't do it on the record for fear of retaliation from the government? Is that usually what happens?
Yeah, exactly. Because most of these federal agencies, most of my sources are in federal agencies that are dealing with sensitive content, sensitive subjects and stuff. So they are not authorized to, speak openly or to, most of them are agents on the active. So they are not usually the spokesperson or someone, a director or, something like that to be able to actually, put out a comment on behalf of the agency.
Do you ever wonder, because you're also a Mexican citizen, if Mexican government might be, I don't know, trying to look into your technology to see if they can pull stuff out of your drives? Do you ever feel like that might be happening? Are you ever scared of that?
I mean, I usually, my rule of thumb is that if I don't want anything to be shared or to get to the public access or government or another source, whatever, my rule of thumb is everything I do with my cell phone is or could be in the hands of whoever. So whenever I need to take things offline, I literally do things offline. because yeah, basically my rule of thumb is if you're gonna send a message, there is a very high possibility that someone else is getting that message as well. So yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if sometimes someone tells me, well, yeah, we have a bunch of your messages with these or that source or whatever. So I wouldn't be surprised and I wouldn't be like, oh shit. For me, it will be like, yeah, I mean, nothing really compromising. I share it on my devices.
Um, I want to get back to your childhood. So you grew up in Juarez. What was that like?
I mean, I grew up in Juarez in the 90s and it was an interesting time to grow up specifically in Ciudad Juarez, because in the 90s, the main name in the cartel world and stuff was the Lord of the Skies, Amado Carrillo Fuentes, which is this mythical narco that had all this family in Ciudad Juarez and stuff. For the most part, I mean, when you're a kid, probably even these days, well, probably less these days because we have the narco corridos and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, you wouldn't phase that part of the city or part of the world. I also think we're very, very differently. My childhood was pretty much normal. I lived in probably a middle upper class neighborhood in Ciudad Juarez and was just going out with my friends. I was very active and very, probably I was always wanting to be on the street and playing with my friends and, like pushing my limits a lot. If it was on the bike, if it was on the, neighborhood that I was allowed to be in probably in high school, I started to get not into fights, but I will get my nose broken several times for being that kind of dude that was always kind of like defying the gang members. And, there was this huge gang around my high school called the Vagos Uno. And, they were older. They were, like this cholo type. And every single time I thought, I walked my way back home from high school. And every single time I thought I was gonna be faster than them. So that was my challenge every Friday. I would go out, walk by their part and throw a finger to them and then start running. And every single time it will get to me, beat my ass. So, yeah, I was that kind of like that kind of chicken.
Is if you don't mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm 36, about to be 37.
37. Okay. So yeah, this was in the 90s about.
Yeah.
And these were you a high achiever in school growing up?
No, man. I mean, to be perfectly honest, I sucked at school probably until college. I mean, even in college, I signed up for journalism school in El Paso, at UTEP, or the University of Texas in El Paso. And, but I was never at school, man. I mean, I still do have a hard time being on a desk or behind a desk or doing a lot of that kind of stuff where I'm feeling wasting my time. So I was always like at school, man, since middle school. Yeah, I always sucked at school. I never attended college here at UTEP, so I was dismissed. I was literally fired from school, and so I went to college into Juarez at a private university at Monterrey, and I graduated from mass media and journalism school in Juarez, Texas.
So your degree's in Mexico.
Yeah,
That's from
yeah,
Mexico.
exactly. My degree is in Mexico. Yeah. I'm sorry.
I was gonna ask, what year did you graduate? How old were you when you graduated college?
I think I graduated on 2012. I think I was like 20 something. I don't know. Just do the math, but it wasn't 2012 when I graduated college. But ever since high school, I knew that I wanted to be a journalist. That's something that was very, very clear to me. I just had a meeting with a friend from high school, the other day, and he was reminding me how I was, always saying like, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I'm going to be a journalist. So I literally had to go to college just to have the paper, just to do, like the right thing. But at the same time, on my first year of college, I went to this local newspaper in Juarez called El Diario de Juarez, which was like the main newspaper in Juarez. And I applied for a job as a delivery because I was like, I'm never going to get a job like, in the newsroom. I'm literally in my first year of college, but I probably can deliver the paper and be the first one to read the news and kind of like walk or, like find my way up to the newsroom. The editor, one of the people that was going to interview me got confused or something, and they asked me if I was there for the copy position, copy editor. And I said yes, and they literally faked my fucking way out, and they hired me. And probably like we're like 5-6 months after they noticed, the editor came back to me and said like, "Hey man, I just realized you lied on your application. You're not supposed to be here, but you're already here. You're doing a good job." And they told me we're about to open operations in El Paso. You speak English. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, are you allowed to work in the US? I'm like, yes. So he's like, all right, so you're a copy editor in El Paso now. And I'm like, okay, man. So I mean, by my second year of school, I was already a copy editor at this paper in El Paso. Um, on my third year of college, I was already writing because again, I thought it was just like grabbed opportunities, like there was this, for me, it was a great assignment. When Arizona was putting out this law, SB 1070, which was highly anti-Mexican, anti-immigrant law, a group of activists that some of them fought with Malcolm X back then, put together a bus and they were traveling all through the country, uh, protesting against this new law in Arizona. So the reporter didn't show up that night when he was supposed to ride that fucking bus, and also copy editor, and I was there until very late night. So I raised my hand. I was like, dude, if that dude is not showing up, I'll do it. My editor was like, dude, you don't know how to write a story and send dispatches and shit. And I was like, dude, I know how to write a story, man. Just trust me, I'll do it. I mean, it's either that or you lose the opportunity to have someone on that bus. And he's like, okay, fuck it. Off you go. So that was literally my first story and my first set of stories, the other El Paso. And I was still in my third year of college, so I had to balance a bit, call my teachers and say like, you know what, I'm going to be out for probably the rest of the week, but I can still dispatch homeworks from on the road. And so, yeah, I had to do that a lot. Then, like, probably the next year, not probably the same year, because I was like 19 years old, 20 years old. One of my colleagues at that newspaper was having a call, and I was kind of like sneak peeking, his call. And it was a call by these news agency. It's basically associated passport in Spanish called EFE News Service. And they were looking for a correspondent in Juarez. So I was like, dude, tell them I'm your guy. And he's like, dude, you're here, you're in college, there's no fucking way you're gonna be a correspondent. And I'm like, promise me, man, I'm not gonna make you look bad. I can do this shit. And he was like, all right, off you go. And yeah, I became a correspondent for these news agencies for the rest of my career. And yeah, kind of switched to freelancing with El Diario now, so I can, juggle my time between El Diario, being a correspondent and being my last years of college, my last half of college. So I was extremely fucking busy. That was also when the city began seeing a lot of deaths, when Ciudad Juarez was literally the capital murder of the world. So I was traveling on a motorcycle from one murder scene to another one, writing homeworks in between, sending stuff for El Diario del Paso, or traveling to El Paso on my motor, then back to Juarez to the murder scene, and then back to El Paso to finish my shift in El Diario. And so yeah, it was crazy times. But yeah, that was literally my first years in my school in terms of journalism.
So you started working at the audio, the print newspaper, and when did you stray away from working in the print to starting to freelance, working for Vice, other places?
I guess the whole print operation was very different than any others because you had a time frame, a very specific and tight time frame, right? At some point, I became the like it was something like the afternoon or the second half of the day editor for El Diario del Paso. So I was the youngest reporter there. I only had like 20, 21 years old, but I was at the same time the editor on the afternoon. So I had to push other reporters to turn their shit on time and to do all sort of other things that require some management skills and not only writing. And that was very different than just dispatching news to a digital outlet that they could call you in the middle of the night to send a story, and that story was published within the next 5 to 10 minutes. That it was literally dispatched. So yeah, I mean, those two things were very different. I learned both ways, how to work on a print. Also, it was very restraining the amount of characters you have to write a story, and I had to review. Well, I had to think on my own writing in terms of, okay, this is going to be on one of the inside pages and on the cover page. So I have less characters to write this story. And that was very different from digital where you could write literally whatever sort of, characters you have available. And, and yeah, but yeah, I mean, that's literally when I came out of college since 2000, probably before, since 2010, I was already freelancer. And I kind of have kept that way. I never accepted a staffer position up until this day. I don't know staffer position.
You weren't a staffer at El Diario in El Paso?
I was a staffer, yeah, for the
Uh-huh.
first couple of years or first year. And then I switched to freelance with them so I can keep working with FA. And at the same time, I first started pitching to Vice back then when they were literally just opening up shop in the news digital world. And with several other outlets in Mexico, Universal, yeah, a lot of different newspapers and magazines.
I'm curious about this because I remember hearing in an interview back in the day that you grew up in Juarez, right? And you went to school, and was it a private school where you went to school with a lot of the sons of narcos?
Yeah, yeah, but that was in the elementary school. When I was in elementary, I attended both. My first 3 years of elementary were in a public school, and then my parents moved me to a private school, one of the wealthiest, more expensive schools in Juarez, and that's where Amado Carrillo had two of his kids. One of his kids was with my sister in the class of my sister, which is 4 years younger than me, and the other kid, Andres, was at my classroom. So I remember, I remember a lot of these '90s navigators, huge SUVs, suburban like, and he had a lot of ¿cómo se llaman? Bodyguards around, and he had like two or three different wives. Same school. I only saw him one time in school. It was literally in the middle of the day, like 10 in the morning. It was a Catholic school, so we had to do our prayings in the morning. We were just wrapping up that stuff. And then he knocked on the door and he asked for the teacher for Andresito. He's like, can I have Andresito? And Andres came out and he kind of said some good vibes, but it was weird because he was wearing one of these weird 90s Versace, shirts that were very popular amongst narcos back then. And he had two other guys suited with him and probably bodyguards. So he talked to Andresito, he looked like really excited, whatever, and then he said goodbye. Andresito came back to him and he left and we never saw him again.
And that was Carrillo, right?
That was Carrillo.
Is Carrillo still alive, or did he die back in a
He
while
died,
ago?
I think he died in 191, 92, something like that, 90, no, 94, 96, 96, I think it was.
So you were born like 85?
80, 86, yeah.
86. Okay.
Yeah.
So you were a really little kid when that was
Yeah,
happening.
yeah,
Wow.
exactly. I was literally in elementary school. Yeah.
And back then, did you know that he was who he was?
No, not at all, man. I mean, this is something that I kind of like started realizing eventually, and then I asked my parents, like, "Hey, is this guy who I think that you know?" And then we, as a family, started like, yeah, talking more openly about that. So yeah, I kind of like reconstructed that memory with my parents that they were obviously like adults by then, so they do remember more clearly. And I do remember that because Andresito was really quiet. He was sort of like one of my good friends back then in elementary, you know. But then after that, we never saw him again. You know, like he was taken out of school, and so, I mean, I didn't really know that there was not like no one chatting about that, like, oh, that's another thing. But it was weird because every other guy at that school, I remember their parents were showing up all the time. You know? His dad picked him up, or his mom was picking, and this guy literally lived with bodyguards. Like, the bodyguards were, it wasn't even a mom. It was bodyguards who picked him up from school, and he was like extremely introverted. And these kind of like weird things where two navigators stepped in, and then this guy came out and took him out of the classroom. So these kind of little snippets I remember from that time. At the time, I, of course, I didn't even know who that guy was. I just thought it was weird that he didn't have a dad or a mom picking him up or dropping him to school and shit.
Wow. I imagine, kids you were friends with, like, just went for 1 year in kindergarten, that was undressed for 1 year, and then, you had a couple questions, but it was nothing more than that.
Yeah.
I asked you about this because, I don't know, I imagine that since you went to a private school for a little bit and you went to school with one of the sons of narcos, it wasn't like you guys were poor growing up, and so I feel like a lot of times Americans get this vision of Mexicans or Mexico that it's just like a rundown, horrible place with no money, and it's just like a third world country.
Yeah.
But that wasn't really that's not really what you experienced growing up, was it?
No, that was. I mean, luckily that was not my case. Both my parents have. My mom is a doctor. My dad is a lawyer. So they both do good money. They've always put us on private schools, and for the most part, I mean, our first house was a decent sized house in a middle to upper neighborhood in Juarez. Then when violence started kind of like picking up a bit, we moved to a gated community to one of the most explosive neighborhoods in Ciudad Juarez, which it's literally a bubble. I don't think that represents Mexico at all. Uh, when you see the contrast between that specific bubble, which is a gated community where you've seen these series called Desperate Housewives, and like that kind of houses with palm trees and shit. That's literally it behind these huge gates and a security guard and a bunch of cameras. And you need to, in order to get a house or a piece of land and start making your house shit, they do a lot of like background search, so they know that your money is legit and that you're not laundering or you're not a narco or your wealth is not really, So there leads a lot of, like proper businessmen from the city, owners of a lot of restaurants, owners of hotels, owners of factories, politicians as well, doctors, lawyers, that kind of people live in that community. Um, but I've always felt that since that has never represented Mexico in general, that it doesn't really represent the city, that probably 1% of the city, and at least talking about Juarez, most of my friends were not from that community. Even from high school, I remember, you know, getting together, having other kind of friends, friends from the poorest parts of town and that were dealing with a very different kind of life. which was funny to them and funny to me for both worlds. Because when they come to my house, we used to have, like a nanny, people helping us at home. And they were like, what the fuck, dude? Like, what the fuck? What's his house? What's his neighborhood? And but he had someone just answering the phone at home saying something like, house of the Chaparro family and shit. Like, that's super weird. And I was absolutely attracted by the other side of things, by they were living in these sort of like projects in the middle of the city in downtown Juarez, dealing with drug dealers around their house and, crazy rooftops, with beautiful looks of the city, but at the same time, people shooting up there, and that kind of, a lot of like, some of the moms were prostitutes and shit. So I was like absolutely attracted by that kind of life, and because probably that was the opposite of what was facing in my own home. So I think that gave me my first set of sources. Not most, but a lot of those guys became drug dealers and eventually narcos and those people involved more in the criminal aspect. So when I decided that I was going to be a journalist instead of writing stories, I was, like just pick up a phone or something. So again, we will meet and then take me to places where it was usually hard for a journalist to get access to, especially with a camera or with a notebook and shit.
Wow, so you grew up in a, I guess, pretty middle class to higher class, but you also saw the complete other side of Mexico, where complete poverty, very dirty and it's very different. But you say you were always like you always had an attraction to the grittier side of life, or you were always curious about that, right?
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. I mean, I really don't even know why. I mean, I look at my sister, and she's definitely more of that life, like of private schools and international traveling and that kind of yeah, of person. And since I can remember, probably middle school, high school, I was attracted to another kind of life, to the street, to these ugly corners of my city. When most of my friends were going to these clubs, fancy clubs in the city and shit, I was going to the ugliest bars in downtown Juarez with a bunch of punks, and literally the punk scene was huge back then with a fucking mods and drinking like bootleg shit when I was like 17, 16 years old. I also started using drugs super, super young, probably my first bump of coke was about 15, 16 years old. And yeah, man, I had my good and ugly encounters with drugs. Um, you know, and, and yeah, I don't like, and I was, since I remember, I was attracted to that kind of life. So I guess the privilege was that was the daily life for most of my friends, but I can go there, have fun and fuck up and that stuff and get back to a gated community with a nanny and with, no scarcity at all. I had a car since I was really young and shit. So yeah, man, I had the privilege to kind of like circle in between both worlds.
Something I wanted to ask you about too, that I feel like a lot of times when people have this attraction to the other life, even though they're not in it, and they get down the wrong path sometimes, and they get involved with drugs, or they want to, kind of be involved in that violence in a sense. Was that kind of your story? Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Uh, Not really, man. I honestly, and this is, I made a lot of like thinking about that. Like, why was I attracted? Was it the adrenaline or was it like trying to be like a bad guy or whatever? But I think it always had a component of like social inequality. I was always curious to know why these people live like that and what like social issues they were facing, like violence and drugs and that. And I was, even before I started writing stories, I always traveled with a photo camera and a notebook. So I was writing notes and revisiting those notes from back then, from when I was in high school and stuff. most of my notes are like, these needs to change, man. This is not quite for a country. So no one should live like that. And I think there is a way out from this and blah, blah, blah. So mostly on the political, social aspect of it. Back then before thinking seriously of becoming a journalist, I thought that I was probably going to be a sociologist. I was like, I want to explore these side of things and stuff. But yeah, I think that was mostly why I was attracted to that. I thought that there was a possibility for change.
But using drugs young, that never really stuck with you. It was never an issue for you.
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I really had my struggle with drugs at some point. I think about like 18 years old or so, I had a bar overdose, and so yeah, I really had some struggle with it for a good time when I was young, and yeah, eventually I think this is how it's something that I was taught. I think literal journalism saved my life because then I mean, when some of my friends decided to go to that side of the world, to become criminals or do that kind of shit, that's when it sort of parted ways, and I decided to become a journalist. And I guess all the addiction trait I had for drugs and shit, I flipped them over to journalism, to writing, to reading, to writing more and reading more, and then another job, another job, another job, and finishing high school instead of college. And so I guess in that sense, journalism saved me. Also, in another sense, when I killed five of my friends, I was literally out because I was so fucking tired from working so much. I was supposed to be out with them, but I passed out in my home. I was like, I fell asleep, and my editor woke me up at like 3 in the morning, calling me for that. There was something happened in the bar, whatever. I showed up, and it was my five friends that I was supposed to be with. So I guess because I literally stayed super late writing stories and homework and shit, I was not there that moment. Can you 1 second? Let me just get my dog in the house. This is the
Yeah.
podcast. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I think this is a story you've probably told a few times about the time that you're supposed to be out with your friends at the bar, and then it got shot up, and you're supposed to be there. So journalism saved your life in a couple ways, from drugs, and then also that night. If you hadn't sunk your life into journalism, you probably would have been there in a different situation where you would have died.
Yeah, mostly sure, man. I'm pretty sure that I just have one good friend from that era that we kind of grow up together. He lives also literally a couple of blocks from here. He has his daughter and shit, and he's out of that shit. He's a businessman. He's doing really well here, and we always go back to that time when we were like, dude. I mean, we really dodged a bullet literally back there. We were hanging out with wrong people, doing all sorts of wrong shit. And to me, it was journalism, and for him, it was literally just starting a business and shit. So we literally dodged that bullet, back then. And yeah, I remember that time, like, that, I've always done a lot of things at the same time. I'm that kind of person that, gets into a lot of different things at the same time. So I remember that night, I had to turn over something for college. Can't remember what, but it was something like a video or something like that. Yeah, I had to turn like a short film or can't remember, something like that. I had a camera with me. And then at the same time, I was doing a lot of like small dispatches for this news agency. Um, And I just had gotten out from El Diario from El Paso, crossing to Juarez. And I was writing poetry back then, and I was in a poetry class on Saturdays and on the weekend. So we had a reading, and I was reading my poems at a local cafe and stuff. So I was there, I read my poems, and I stepped out because I needed to go to write another dispatch and to kind of like wrap up my video. And I remember I was like doing some shots outside the cafe because I was going to use that for my school video. And then my five friends showed up. They were literally walking because they were going to a bar next door. And I hadn't met them in a while. They were kind of like not pissed, but kind of like, I don't know, like they were weird at me because they were like, dude, you haven't hung out for a while. You're always busy. You're never with us anymore. And they've always had this thing where they thought that it was because of the money and my friends with money. Like, and they were like, oh, now you're hanging out with your rich friends and you don't hang out with us anymore and shit. And I was like, dude, I mean, I'm decent and I have school. I have two jobs. I'm doing this and that. But I mean, I guess tonight is a great night. And they're like, dude, I'm bartender at the bar next door. So come over. Let's spend the night there. And I was like, fuck yes, man. I'll definitely go ahead and do that. I'll just go home, drop my bike and get my car and we'll meet you guys here. Went there, finished my short film, whatever, and still had to write a bunch of stuff for this news agency because they're based out of Spain. So their day was my night. So that's when I had to write more stories. I was writing 13 fucking stories a day. It was short stories, probably 200 to 300 words, but still, there were like 10 to 13 fucking stories a day. So I had to write a lot of stuff. And then I was like, shit, man, I need to crash a bit. It was already like 10 p.m. or so. So I thought like I should probably take a short nap, and then leave for my friends. I passed out and I woke up to a call from my editors in Spain alerting me that there was a killing of some kids at a local bar. It didn't ring in my head because that was not the bar where we were supposed to meet. That was a bar really close to where I was living back there, like kind of like fancy part of town, really close to my parents. And so I jumped to the my motorcycle and called the photographer. And he said like, yeah, I'm already here, man. Brought by, I think it's 5 kids, some girls, among the dad. The body's still here. Taking photos and I'll wait for you here. I showed up. There was already a lot of police and a lot of fucking mess, And when I got closer, the photographer, I couldn't really see what was happening inside the bar. So I had the photographer to show me the photos. And I look at the photos and he zooms in and I recognize one of my friends and then another one and then his girlfriend and then the other girl. And they were absolutely fucking riddled with bullets. And I was like, fuck, these are my 5 friends, man. And they were still taking the bodies out. And when they were taking the bodies out, another good friend, brother of one of the one who told me he was bartending at another bar, he was literally still, hugging the body of his brother, crying and shit. They had to put him in handcuffs because he was losing his fucking mind. And I was like, fuck, I just called my editors and told them that I couldn't write that story. So I was too personal. Those guys were my friends and shit. And they were like, oh shit, man. Oh yeah, by all means, don't feel the pressure. So we'll deal with it. Just go home and I don't know. I went back home super fucking with a very bad trip, I was like, I don't know what I was feeling. I was confused, I was like, what the fuck happened? And then at the same time, I was like, I was supposed to be there, so I had some kind of guilt a bit. But also, I was glad I was not there. But then I felt guilty because I was glad I wasn't there. And I was like, shit. Is this what a journalist does? Should I literally put myself and write that story? Because at the end, I'm a journalist, and so I was so confused. So it was 3 or 4 in the morning. So no, I went back to sleep and and then woke up the next day. And yeah, it was a weird. It was Saturday. It was a Saturday next day. It was just a weird Saturday, man. Stay home and trying to like think if I was actually afraid or not, or if I was actually failing, if I actually wanted to be a journalist, because I was like, I'll probably find myself a lot in this position if I follow a journalism career in Mexico. But at the same time, I was a bit surprised and enticed by the whole fucking thing, because I was like, what the fuck? Something is happening in this country, and it's literally happening before my eyes in my city. This is where something is brewing up, and it's happening right in my city, right in front of my eyes. So I'll just probably need to put myself more in there.